Writers and editors John Laurse and Terry Toedtemeier banded together 6 years ago to produce a history of Oregon photography. Focusing on the Columbia River Gorge, the two produced a book that's release corresponded with an exhibit at the Portland Art Museum this past fall. Part history of the photographic techniques and part history of the gorge, Wild Beauty is as magnificent as the gorge that it depicts. As a fellow committee member wrote, Wild Beauty is a beautiful and breathtaking work of research and rediscovery to be appreciated and treasured by anyone with an interest in photography, history, and the majesty of the landscape. Sadly, one of the architects of this book, Terry Toedtemeier, passed away unexpectedly this past December. We are pleased, however, this evening to present this award to John Laurse and Terry's wife, Prudence Roberts. Please join me in welcoming them.
It's really an honor to be here with these other writers that have received awards this evening. And I went back and looked at, online you can see other people that have won this award, and it reads in many ways like a who's who of Northwest writers, and it's just, I'm honored to be listed among them. As Scylla mentioned, my partner in this project, my co-author and collaborator and really good friend, Terry Toedtemeier, died in Hood River on December 10th. We had just done a presentation on the book, and we were signing books, and heart failure just grabbed him there. But I take some comfort in knowing that he got to see the success of the book that we put together, and the exhibition that was stimulated by the book. We started making the books about 7 years ago, and Terry was curator of photography at the Portland Art Museum and was able to persuade them, given that we were doing this book, to allow him to mount that exhibition there. And the exhibition was tremendously successful. Some 80,000 people went through there. And Terry got to see the success of this book and the success of that exhibition. And we had found out about a week before he died that we were going to get this award. We'd known for a little while we were shortlisted, and then we found out about 5 days before he died. So he's here in spirit, and I'm grateful for that. The way this book came about was that Terry and I met working on another book about in the early 90s, a book of some minor white photographs that had been sitting in the vault at the Art Museum for 50 years, unattended, unremarked, and we, through a odd chain of circumstances, ended up working on this book together. Terry wrote a foreword for it, and I designed it. And we just hit it off, and we became really good friends. And we would get together routinely after that. And every time we got together, we would think about what else could we do in order to work together. And that was really the impetus for Wild Beauty. We'd get together and we'd think of other books of obscure photography from the Pacific Northwest that we could bring out of some hidden archive and make available to the public. And Terry was a wonderful guy, had a wonderful sense of humor and a wonderful knowledge of the history of photography and of the photography of the Pacific Northwest in particular. And I've been a book designer for nearly 40 years now, and editor and producer of books. And we've both done a fair amount of writing in other contexts. Neither of us had tackled doing a book before. And we decided that we wanted to make a series of books of Northwest photography, and Wild Beauty is the first book in that series. We chose the Columbia Gorge as the topic for our first book because Terry had this really deep and broad knowledge of the photographers and the photography that had occurred in the gorge starting in 1867, and we decided to end it in 1957, which is when the Dalles Dam was completed, and the second of 2 dams in the gorge, which drowns Celilo Falls, and from that point forward, the gorge is the river, the Columbia River within the gorge, is essentially a series of lakes rather than the wild and raging river that it was when Lewis and Clark came down, the wild and raging river that it had been for 10,000 years before that, and the wild and raging river that it was when Carleton Watkins, the first major photographer, arrived in the Pacific Northwest in 1867. So our book covers this 90-year span. It was an enormous amount of work. It was a lot more work than I think we had bargained on. And we really enjoyed every step of it. One of the things that would happen along the way, we had this a very expensive book to make. And so we, not besides everything else we were doing, the research and sifting through photographs and choosing photographs and writing the book and designing it and producing it and doing all of that, we had to make presentations a lot to people who might possibly help pay for making this book. And sometimes we would make one of these presentations, and people were always blown, if you're familiar with the book, people were always blown away by the photographs themselves, just sort of stunned by them, and especially we're mostly talking to people in and around Portland, so they're familiar with the Gorge. Then they would see these photographs and think, oh my God, I had no idea something like this existed. And then every once in a while, in one of these presentations, a person would say to us, well, these are just great photographs, but why do you want to go to all this trouble to make a book? Why don't you just put them online? You know, you would appreciate that. And that wasn't at all what we wanted to do. I mean, it was just such a dumbfounding question. We never would know how to respond to that exactly. I don't think we ever gave anybody a say. And I would always be polite and say, well, that's a really good question, but actually I didn't think it was such a good question. Why would you want to put them online? I mean, yeah, we can do that, but making a book was really our purpose. We wanted to give the photographs context. We wanted to put some scholarship around them and explain who made them and how they were made and the circumstances under which they were made and to some extent why they were made, and really give people a way to understand the photographs. So you could either look at this book and just flip through it and look at the pictures, or you could read the text, or you could read deeply into the text. And there's a lot of different ways that you could approach the book. And so we just felt it was important. You make this, it's a wonderful convention, this neat package in which there's writing and pictures, and it's got a binding on it, and you can carry it around, and you can peruse it at your leisure and share it with other people. It's so much more convenient than a computer. So if books hadn't existed, we had to invent them in order to do this for us. One of the really important things to us was to make the book in the Northwest. It's a book about the Northwest. We're Northwest guys, and we really wanted to, we're raising the money here, and we really wanted the money to stay here. A lot of books like this these days are what they call offshored, meaning that it's actually not, it's not off our shores, it's off there. We send it to Asia, and they get printed there. And I had no interest in doing that. Terry had no interest in doing that. And Wild Beauty was, every bit of it was produced within 10 miles of where you're sitting. The retouching was done. Part of what you can do with contemporary technology is take old photographs that are faded or torn or have been written on or are otherwise degraded and restore them to exactly what they would have looked like when the photographers made them, and then put them back on paper, which is how the photographs were meant to be seen in the first place, and present them as they were when the photographers made them. And we had very good fortune in having people locally that could work with us on every step of this. And actually, the printer of Wild Beauty, Bruno, is here today. We could not have done this without them.